Satsambhakti and the Mumukshatva, and we pursue that with devotion, the guarantee that the scriptures and the teacher is saying is that our minds will be calm enough to understand the deeper significance of the scriptures, and we will reach liberation. Now the teacher says, constant sincere contemplation of Vedantic mantras leads to true knowledge, and this process is called vichar. Constant sincere contemplation of the Vedantic mantras. Now, a mantra, what is a mantra? In Sanskrit, mantra, man is manas. In the mind, you do contemplation sincerely. That is with the mind, and that's the M-A-N, the man part. Tras is trajenda. That means when you contemplate in that line, your mind gets elevated to higher realms. So when you repeat mantras in that manner, your mind gets elevated to a higher realm. That's why they are called mantras. And they are, the teacher is saying, by constant, sincere contemplation of Vedantic mantras. Vedanta, as you know, there are 4 Vedas in our scriptures. The Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, and Atharvana Veda. There are 3 parts to each one of these Vedas. And the last part of every Veda is the Upanishads, or the Aranyaka portion, where the last portion is called the Upanishads. And that's because it is the end of the Veda, it is called Veda Anta, meaning the end of the Veda, Vedanta. So all the mantras in the Upanishads, if you contemplate on the deeper significance, the teacher says, Vedanta Artha Vichar, the meaning of the Vedantic mantras, you contemplate on that in your meditation seat, then when one reflects upon these mantras and grasps the deeper significance of these mantras, a knowledge comes to you, which is unlike any other knowledge. Because we know in the secular world, the knowledge that we get is the knowledge of something, the knowledge of science, knowledge of chemistry, knowledge of physics. These are all secular knowledges. These knowledges keep changing all the time. Now, Albert Einstein is credited with that theory of relativity. It was thought that that is the ultimate. But now, the modern scientists are questioning the validity of that statement. Why? Because there are now new data that have come up, and based on the new data, they are questioning his conclusions at that time. So the secular knowledge keeps changing, but scriptural knowledge never changes. It remains the same throughout. It never changes. So that's why the teacher says that when one contemplates sincerely on these Vedantic mantras, a certain knowledge comes in. And that knowledge is quite unlike any other knowledge that we know. In meditation, when we strive hard to experience the meaning of the Upanishadic mantras, we are in the realm of Atma Vichar. So when you are meditating and you are contemplating on these different mantras, you are in that realm of Atma Vichar. Atma meaning the self-iness, the spiritual self-iness. We are inquiring and trying to access that inner divinity that we have, and that's called Atma Vichar. Through this method, all our misunderstandings, which were the result of ignorance, ends, and knowledge shines forth. This knowledge instantly removes all sorrows. So the teacher says that when this knowledge comes in meditation, when we contemplate sincerely, a certain knowledge comes that removes all the ignorance. Why are we ignorant? Because we have this misunderstanding that we are this body, that we are this mind, when in actual fact we are not that. But when that ignorance is removed, we reach the liberation. It's the example is again the dream. In the dream, I may be suffering through various things that are happening in my dream. I may be chased by a tiger and I'm running for my life and the tiger is gaining on me. And I'm really afraid that the tiger is going to catch me and eat me up. Just then I wake up. The moment I wake up, all my sorrows of the dream ends right there, instantly. I immediately realize that it was only a dream and I don't need to worry about it. So in the same way, once we reach that level where we realize that we are Atman, that self, all our misunderstandings, and because of those misunderstandings, we are suffering right now. We have these ups and downs, our sadness, our worries. All these are based on our misunderstanding that we are the body, mind and intellect. Once we reach that level, all these sorrows end immediately. And the teacher says, faith, devotion and meditation are the chief factors that helps to liberate ourselves from bondage. Now, due to our non-apprehension of our real nature, we identify with the not-self and suffer. Example, the dream that I just said right now. Now, the students, after hearing all this, ask the teacher, can I please ask you a question? With all reverence and humility, the student asks the teacher, can I ask you a question? And the teacher says, okay, yeah, go ahead and ask the question. And then the student asks this famous verse in Vivek Chudamani. Konama bandha kadamecha agataha kadam pradishya jagadam vimushaka kosavanatma paramatta atma tayor viveka tadamecha duchyada. This is a thing that we were asked to memorize by our Gurudev during the Vivek Chudamani camp. And he said, after 2 days, I will ask somebody to stand up and recite these 4 lines. So everyone, you better memorize this. That's why I memorized this. I knew he would not ask me because I am very weak in my Sanskrit. And out of his infinite wisdom and compassion, I know he would never ask me to stand up and say this. And he did. So that's how I remember this. Now the meaning is, Konama Bandha. The student is asking. Now the student asks the teacher, can I ask you a question? And the teacher says yes. He packs 7 questions in that one little thing. So our Gurudev says, the student must definitely be a Brahmin. Because you get permission to ask 1 question and he asks 7 questions. All packed into that. So Konama Bandha. There were several technical terms that the teacher was using that the student did not understand. So he is asking, Konama Bandha, what is this bondage that you are talking about? You say that we are bound, we are in bondage. I don't feel that. I am a free man. I live in a free country. I can do whatever I want. So what is this bondage that you are talking about? So that's the first question. Konama Bandha. What is this bondage you are talking about? Kadam Esha Agataha. If that bondage is there, how did I get bound with that? How did I get that bondage? That's the second question. How did I get this bondage? The third question is, Kadam Pradishta. Now this bondage has come, all right, okay, so I get bonded and I'm I'm in bondage. How come this bondage remains with me throughout my life? It's not just, it just comes once and then goes away. It stays with me throughout my life, this life, and then the next life continues and it goes on and on. How come this bondage remains with me all the time? So that's the third question. Kadam pratishta. Jagatam vimochana. How do I get rid of this bondage? That's the next question. How do I get that removed? Kosavan Atma. The teacher was talking about the self and not self. So he's asking, Kosavan Atma. This Anatma. Atma is what we know is the spiritual center in us. Anatma is anything other than that. Anatma. So the student is asking, Kosavan Atma. What is this Anatma that you are talking about? And what is Paramakta Atma? What is the Atma? You are talking about Atma and Anatma. So what is this Kosavanatma and what is Paramakta Atma? And then Tayor Viveka. Please tell me the difference between the two. Tayor Viveka, Duschada. Please explain this to me in detail. Now the teacher's answer to these 7 questions are the next 520 verses in the Vivek Chudamani. The answer to all these 7 questions. So the teacher says, to gain spiritual knowledge, to liberate oneself and reach Brahman is entirely a self-effort. To reach that stage is entirely it's up to us. No teacher can ever help you with that liberation. He can guide you, but he can never take you there. So the teacher starts off by saying that to gain spiritual knowledge and to liberate oneself and reach Brahman is entirely a self-effort. The teacher or the guru cannot do it for you. And then Shankaracharya gives 3 examples. The father's debt can be settled by the son. If the father has a lot of debts and the creditors are waiting outside demanding that their money be paid, and the father does not know how to pay these creditors, and he is extremely worried. The son says, Dad, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And he goes out and tells the creditors, look, don't bother my father anymore. I personally will settle all your accounts. I will pay you 10% of my father's debt every month. And over the next 1 year, I'll settle all your debts. So that's the first example Shankaracharya is saying. A son can settle a father's debt, but the father's delusions and worries and anxieties can never be removed by the son. It has to be removed only by the person concerned. His worries and anxieties can only be removed by himself. Nobody else can remove it for him. The debt can be removed by the son, but the worries and anxieties that the person has, he only can do it. Second example, heavy load on your head. If there are a few people going on a pilgrimage or wherever, and they are carrying their luggage with them on their head and on their backpack and all that, and you are walking and you are tired, your load can be relieved temporarily by somebody else. They take compassion on you and say, okay, don't worry, I'll carry your load for the next 1 mile or so. So they can carry your load and relieve your load temporarily. But your hunger can be satisfied only by you eating. When you are hungry, you cannot say, okay, can you eat for me and solve my hunger? No. If I am hungry, I have to eat. And then only my hunger will be satiated. So people can relieve my load but my hunger can be satisfied only by me. And the third one is the patient who faithfully follows the treatment gets healed. If I am ill and the doctor prescribes some medications for me, if I take the medications faithfully, then the chances are that I will get healed. I cannot get somebody else to take the medicine for me. I tell my son, okay, you take the medicines and let me see whether I get better. There's no way. I have to take the medicine myself. So these three examples were given by Shankaracharya to show that we and we alone can liberate ourselves ultimately. The secular sciences can be studied and mastered. If you want to study medicine, you go to medical school and study and you become a doctor. The doctor does not have to have diseases to know what the disease is all about. He can study about it and then he understands what the disease is and he can treat those diseases. He doesn't have to have those diseases. A lawyer does not have to be a criminal and have to go to prison and come to be able to understand what the criminal is all about. He can defend the criminal without ever committing a crime. But in the spiritual knowledge, you can study, you need to study, but that alone does not give you liberation. You have to let that knowledge come into you subjectively and reform you. You have to get reformed by that knowledge. That's the difference between the spiritual knowledge and the scientific knowledge. Secular sciences can be studied and mastered, but Atma Vidya can be gained only when one studies it and undergoes subjective regeneration and transformation. Medicines do not create health. When you take medicine for a disease, the medicines do not create health. Your health and well-being is mainly because of your natural resources and your immune mechanisms. That's what gives you the sense of well-being. Medicines only remove the ill health. The bad health that you had, medicines will remove. In the same way, when you study scriptures, similarly the scriptures remove misunderstandings created by our ignorance. But to gain the experience of the absolute reality, one has to put in sincere effort, guided by the Guru and the scriptures. And here the Shankara gives another example. When there is a beautiful moon, it's a beautiful moonlit night, and it's a full moon, and you want to enjoy the beauty, the queenly dignity, the serene consolation, and the message of love and leisure given by the moon cannot be experienced by somebody describing it. So I am looking at the moon, I go to the balcony and I am enjoying all these good things about the moon. The beauty, the calmness, the cool effect that it has, and I am telling you, please come and look at it. And the guy who I am talking to says, no, don't worry, just tell me what you see and I will know. And I am trying to describe it and he is listening to it. He will never get the true experience of that moonlit night. So Shankaracharya says, to have the full experience of that moonlit night, you have to experience it yourself. You cannot just study it or hear it from somebody. Divine nature is all full. When you know that that you and I have various desires. Desires are, what are desires? Desires are for things that I do not have. I don't have something and I desire to get it. So, if I have a desire, that means I don't have it right now. So if I have a desire for more money, that means I don't have that money now. That's why I am desiring money. If I already have a lot of money, I won't have desire for that. If I'm hungry, I have desire for food. I have that desire only because I don't have food in my stomach right now. If my stomach is full, I will not have desire for food. So desire is out of that emptiness or the lack of something. In by nature, the Atman, the self, is all full. He is not wanting in anything. But you and I are in need of something. We want something. We have desires all the time. Our ignorance of this creates desires in our intellect. See, our desires first manifests itself at the level of the intellect. At the intellect level, these desires appear. And when a desire appears at the intellect level, it creates thoughts and agitations in my mind. Why? Because I have the desire and my mind wants to know how I can fulfill my desire. And with those thoughts, I go into action. I do things to acquire that thing which will satisfy my desire. So all this happened because I had that desire. Now these desires, you and I have many different kinds of desires. Our desires are determined by the kind of vasanas that we have. So it is the vasana that determines the kind of desire, and when that desire is there in the intellect, it creates thoughts and agitations in the mind, and when there are agitations in the mind, it creates actions at the body level. So Shankaracharya says, the mind being like these three, ignorance, desire and action, are called the heart knots, the knots that bind us. It is this desire, the thought and the action. These are called the heart knots, or the thing that binds us. And there's a term for that. Hridaya Granthi. It's called the Hridaya Granthi. That it is the heart knots that bind us to these things. So when we have desires, we are bound to that thing. And that is the bondage that we are talking about. These are the cords that bind the ego to the finite and misery of the mortal. Neither yoga nor sankhya or rituals or karma or learning can you get liberation. None of these things. Sankhya is the form of philosophy which is logical, any logical thinking. If you say that, you establish one fact, and because of that, you go to the next step. By inference, you go to the next step. And then once you accept that, then you go to the next step. By logical argument, that's called the Sankhyan way of thinking. So neither by Sankhyan method or by yoga, by any kinds of yoga, meaning Hatha Yoga, Pranayama and whatever, or by performing rituals, or by doing Karma Yoga, or by learning the scripture, they by themselves will not give you liberation. They are all necessary, but they only go to quieten your mind and to purify your mind. And with that purified mind, you've got to do the meditation to reach out, and then you will get your liberation. Sankhya philosophy, it says Purusha and Prakriti. The Purusha is the spirit and the Prakriti is the matter. As you all know, the matter is inert and insentient. The spirit is intelligent, sentient and all-knowing. Matter by itself cannot do anything. This chair by itself cannot do anything. Neither can the spirit by itself do anything by itself. But when the spirit is in close proximity to the matter, there is dynamism. Again, Shankara gives an example of the clock or the watch. The spring in the watch is an inert metal, and yet the dynamism of that spring is got by the tension in that spring. It's that tension in the spring that makes it keep going, and that's how the clock keeps going on and on and on. So in the same way, the spirit by itself does not do anything, but in contact with the matter, it performs actions. And it seems as if the spirit is performing the action. It is the matter or the inherent property in that matter that's doing the action, but it is enlivened by the spirit. Prakriti is inert and unintelligent and lifeless, but comes to exhibit characteristics of life in proximity to the Purusha. Spirit by itself cannot do anything, but when in contact with matter, it expresses itself. And Shankara also says, eloquent speeches, brilliant discourses can bring satisfaction to the listeners. So I might be a brilliant speaker and I can talk about spirituality. It might bring satisfaction to the people who are listening, but it will not give me any liberation unless I do the necessary work that I need to do. If we do not have the right intellectual appreciation of the Vedantic text, the right intellectual appreciation, if we don't have it, then no matter what we try to study, it won't help us in any way. All the study of the scriptures are useless if we do not have the right attitude towards the scriptures. Here's another example that Shankaracharya gives. One is bitten by a cobra. Suppose you are out there in the countryside and you are bitten by a cobra, and you are an orthodox high caste man. You don't want the low caste people to touch you. But here is a low caste man who is saying, I know how to treat cobra bite. You don't care whether he is a low caste man or not. You say, go right ahead and treat me. Why? Because your urgent need is that you want to live. You want health. You know that you are bitten by the cobra. So you don't care about his caste or his status or your status. How can I am such a rich man, I am from a high family, I don't want to sit in his little cottage in this dirty place. I don't want to sit there. All that is overlooked by me. Why? Because my need is that I want to get better. My need is that I have been bitten by the cobra, so I need to get better. In the same way, when we are bitten by this ignorance that we have, then we would do anything, or we should be doing anything and everything, that we will take up to the Shastras seriously and seek relief for all our miseries. Why? Because we know that we are now bitten by this ignorance. These are some of the statements that Shankaracharya is giving, which is applicable to each one of us. So the message that Gurudev wants us to have is, this is not something that Shankaracharya is telling his student. This is scriptures talking directly to you and me. We need to personalize these ideas and go with it with a certain motivation, and not be discouraged that we are not in that level. So what's the point in my even trying? No matter how weak a person I am, no matter how much bad things I have done in my life, if I can do a little bit of what they are advising me, to that extent my mind will get better, and with that improvement I can go to the next step, and before I know it I'll be reaching that level where I can be like all the other realized source. So that is the message that Shankaracharya wants us to have. Thank you.